So yeah, we could talk about the main idea of your book. If you want to talk about your book and maybe a
Well,
question surrounding that.
yeah, I mean, just to maybe do a little bit of background before, so like you have as much information as questions from, because I've been a journalist, but in my past, okay? So I'm trying to like set you up for success. Um, yeah, so I was homeless for a year and a half, and I wrote a book about overcoming homelessness and like my experiences with it, called Homeless with God. But I guess based off of what you were saying, the like claim that I would have around that is that um, solving homelessness is really very simple. You give someone a place to live, like give, not like have them work for or like, you know, wait on a list or anything. Okay. And they did this in Helsinki. They took 500 people who were homeless and they gave them a place to live. They gave them a primary care physician, a social worker, and a food stipend. And after a year, 81% of those people were self-sufficient, saving this,
81%.
yeah, saving the city, I think like $15,000 to $16,000 a person. Um, so like that kind of radical solution uh, attempts or solution involvement or campaign, I guess you'd say. Like that's towards the end of my book. I have an afterword, and I talk about that. And that's like I personally am very lucky to have gotten out of homelessness because I think something like 97% of people who are homeless for 7 consecutive months don't make it out. They're out there just basically on the streets for life. Um, and while didn't have consecutive 7 months, I did have like in chunks a total of a year and a half that I was on the streets or in a shelter or whatever. So
I'm glad you're doing better.
yeah, me too. I'm doing well. I work at a hardware store nearby, and
Sweet.
I have my needs met, and I'm able to extend uh, compassion and charity to people um, fairly frequently. So I do feel very thankful and blessed for that.
I'm wondering if the claim we can explore for this conversation would be giving people a home solves homelessness.
Yeah,
Does that sound like something that you believe is the case?
I think there are other supports that are necessary around that, but I think at its basic level, um, it's the problem is homelessness. How do you solve that? You give someone a home.
What is giving somebody a home the biggest piece of the pie that would solve homelessness? Is it like the biggest thing you could do?
I mean, you could go beyond that. Certainly, you could give someone a home. You could give them new furniture. You could give them a new wardrobe. You could give them a haircut. You could go down the line and provide these things that are maybe not needs, but provide a level of comfort,
Hmm.
and sense of security, sense of humanity, like giving someone a haircut and like a beard trim when they haven't had it in like 8 months. Like that could help present a sense of humanity for them.
I guess there's a lot that goes into well-being
Sure.
and quality of life. When it comes to defining what we mean by homelessness, if this is what we're going to focus on trying to solve, how would you define what homelessness is?
Homelessness is living in an experience where housing and security is ongoing and daily for an extended period of time.
Okay. And the biggest thing you can do to solve that is giving somebody a home,
I believe that's the core.
the
Like
core.
that's what you need um, most most ardently, what you need is to give them a home.
Maybe everything comes after that's established. Is that what you mean by core, or like the seed, the root, the
Well,
bottom layer?
I'm not trying to present it like a straw man fallacy, but like if someone is hungry, you give them a meal because they're hungry. So now they've eaten, their hunger for that time is solved.
Okay.
Someone is shoeless. To solve that shoeless problem, you give them shoes. Someone is homeless. The essence of solving that homeless problem for that individual is giving them a home.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned this has been kind of done before, studied in other countries.
Yeah.
How would we know if this is true? If giving people a home would solve homelessness, what would be the best? What's the a reason that you have that's the biggest reason that if you didn't have this reason, you would believe it less? This claim. Does that make sense?
I got a little bit lost.
Sorry, yeah. So if you have like one reason that's the biggest, or a couple reasons that support this claim that giving somebody a home solves homelessness, what is that reason or reasons?
I mean, this study was done fairly recently. I don't know the exact date, but it was widely publicized. You know, that this study was presented in like the LA Times, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, major papers, Washington Post throughout the United States, as well as internationally. So, assuming that those sources are credible, I believe this to be true. Also, from my own personal experience, the moment that I thought, okay, I have a base to launch from, so this is anecdotal, it's not empirical necessarily, but anecdotally, when I had a key in my hand to a room that I was renting, I was like, okay, now I can really start moving forward. Now I can think like, how do I get healthcare? Like, how do I get connected with systems of support that I need for mental health? How do I get connected to systems of support that I need for, like, you know, or maybe not need, but to have a more comfortable life, you know, like furniture or nice bedspread or whatever. Like having a home, now I can jump towards the steps beyond that.
For sure.
I was lucky enough to get a job while I was in the shelter. Not everyone who was in the shelter got a job, though they tried to. But I will say probably about 80% of the people who were in the shelter that I lived at had a job. So there's kind of this misconception that like, oh, homeless people are just lazing about doing nothing. I would say the majority of homeless people in the United States have a job, but they're not assured that they're going to get housing. I don't think the work first mentality is tenable. I think we have to like reverse that a little bit and give housing first, work second.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, tell me if this is correct or not. The two main reasons that you believe that giving people a home solves homelessness is this study and personal experience.
Correct.
Is either of those a bigger reason than the other?
I think from an analytical standpoint, the study is a larger reason. It's a larger support for my claim. My personal experience is, only mine. Like, I may believe things or do things that no one else has experienced or done. So I can't really translate that to like a broader umbrella over all the people, who have experienced homelessness. I can say I've been through that, but I can't say, this is going to work for everyone.
Mm-hmm. On a scale from 0 to 100, how confident are you that giving people a home solves homelessness?
81% confident.
Okay.
Because 81% of the people in that scenario became self-sufficient.
Hypothetically, if this study didn't exist, if you couldn't use it as a reason, your confidence level is currently at 81%. Could you try to consider or tell me where you think that level would go? Would it stay the same, go up, or go down?
Without that study, but with my personal experience.
Sure, yeah, you can use your personal
I
experience.
mean, with my personal experience still intact, I'd say it might go up, honestly, because having experienced what I did, you know, I had what can be considered housing. I was staying at the shelter. I had a cot. I had a pillow, and you know that brought me to a place of stability that allowed me to get a job, that allowed me to move upwards and like upgrade my housing, for lack of a better term.
Okay, it would go up. What do you think it might go up to?
I mean, it would go up to 100%, because if I'm basing it simply off of my own personal experience of achieving a place to live and holding down a job and having that housing, even though it's not like ideal housing, you know, it's like 50 people in a room with a cot, which is, you know, someone might look at, in the United States, look at that housing situation and say, oh, that's very unusual. That's like a shelter system. Other third world countries might look at that and be like, wow, that's a really nice place to live. And moving forward from there, getting a job somewhere, like saving money, to do what I did for myself. But having that like secured place to sleep at night was eliminated like the largest source of my anxiety, because I have slept before on the concrete, like on the sidewalk in LA, like near Skid Row, which is not a nice place. So to me, you know, having a cot to sleep on, having a place to put my clothing at night, having access to a shower, like that is a version of housing.
Yeah. So your confidence actually, this study actually decreased your confidence that in this claim.
Yeah, well, I will admit that, yeah, because when I first read the study and was learning about what they did in Helsinki, I thought, oh, this is the golden ticket. Like, everyone is going to be self-sufficient, everyone's going to have housing, everyone in this study is going to, you know, achieve a level of housing security. And that wasn't necessarily the case, because that's what I thought that the housing first model is not airtight. I'll admit that. But I think it's the best that we have.
Okay.
Because if you do like work first models are around 50 to 60% effective.
Is there anything you can think of that would move your current level today? One of these reasons or another reason that would shift your current confidence level? What information could you learn or experience a reason?
I think if they mapped this study over the major cities in the United States, like if they did this same kind of protocol in like LA, New York, here in Denver, Boulder area, the Denver metro area has a higher per capita instance of homelessness than San Francisco, which is,
really?
Yeah, well, I don't have like 100% information on that. I do know that my friend from San Francisco remarked on that. She did some research, so this is secondary information, but she did some research and said that per capita homelessness in the Denver metro area is higher than per capita in San Francisco. So if we mapped this program over these cities, there might be, depending on the results of those studies, if we did that here, then my confidence would maybe increase or decrease. But I think the most important thing,
based on the mapping of the homeless?
No, based on the mapping of a program like they did in Helsinki over these major cities.
Similar type of study here in the U.S.?
Mm.
Okay.
that could increase or decrease my confidence that percentage-wise of the level of efficacy. But ultimately, what would occur is that you would get some significant percentage of individuals into a level of self-sufficiency participating in the community again. So there's really not a loss.
Okay.
Yeah, scenario.
I think I understand your reasoning. It sounds like personal experience is your biggest reason, and studies and additional studies could increase or decrease your confidence based on their result. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. David, how did I do? Good?
I guess I'm not understanding. Your confidence would go down with a study that confirmed that 80%.
Well,
It worked.
so I guess what I'm saying is just from like a purely analytical perspective, the study, 81% of people became self-sufficient. If that study didn't exist and I'm the only like variable in the getting out of homelessness scenario, then it's 100% because I got out of that situation.
Taking that reason away makes your confidence go down.
No, taking the 81% away makes my confidence go up to 100%. It's like, I don't know, it's like mathematically kind of
Maybe like
taking only the anecdotal experience that I've had, which is that
Sample
I won
size of
sample
one of
size
one.
of one versus a sample size of 500.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is personal experience a good enough reason to be 100%?
I don't think it is. I think that's anecdotal is the caveat that I gave to it. But if the only experience I have is my own, then the result would be that. But I don't have just my experience.
Okay.
I have knowledge of what other people are going through news channels and other resources, talking to people who are on the streets, helping them out with a meal, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I have all that experience as well.
It might be hard to imagine, but if we took away the reason personal experience,
Yeah,
where would your 100%?
81%. Because I would have this study, which I consider to be a very sound study.
Okay. If we didn't have the study, if we didn't have the personal experience, where would your confidence be?
My confidence would be neutral. And then I would seek out further information to determine what would make the most amount of sense. Before I read about this study, I was very committed emotionally and mentally to the housing first model. It just sounded like it made the most amount of sense. Like I said at the beginning of the interview, the problem is homelessness. The solution is providing a home. To me, that just seems very straightforward and simple.
Yeah. What's the strongest argument you've heard against that solution being the best solution?
I haven't heard any strong arguments against that being the best solution. I've heard a lot of arguments saying homelessness has high comorbidities with addiction and mental illness, but I would say that having housing helps people overcome both addiction and mental illness, or at least manage them in a way that they can participate in the community.
Do we have a way to tell if this solution is not the best solution?
Like there's a solution that's better than this?
If this solution wasn't the least or most effective,
Okay. So
we
if
have
this
a way to tell if that's not the case.
currently, no. Currently, this study they did in Helsinki, where 81% of the people were self-sufficient after a year, is the strongest protocol we currently have for tackling homelessness. We have a lot of other potential solutions that rank in lower in terms of self-sufficiency for the sample size, but this is the best that we've seen so far.
And that's supporting 81% of your confidence that this solution is the best one. most effective?
I suppose so, though now that I'm thinking about it further, I think maybe separating my confidence level from the actual outcomes of the study might be important to do.
Why?
Because, like I said, I have lived experience with homelessness and overcoming homelessness. I've seen people overcome homelessness. Um, I've interacted frequently with the community, giving out clothing and such, and seen people, go one way or the other, like deeper into the throes of addiction and mental illness, or kind of come out on the other end with job and housing and so on. I think there are probably, there are as many ways to tackle the issue of homelessness as there are people who are homeless. And I think that's the most important thing to think of when we're trying to solve this issue, because a one-shop stop is not going to fit everybody's issue. It's not going to fit everybody's circumstance. But
There's a lot of nuance.
there's a lot of nuance. It's not a black and white issue, But I do think the core of it is providing a home.
Gotcha.
And I think this study they did in Helsinki wasn't just housing first. It was housing first. It was social work first. It was primary care physician first. It was food first. You're taking care of these core needs, and then you can move on from there.
If you hadn't been homeless, do you think you'd feel the same way?
About the housing first model, I think I would be strongly housing first still. I mean, if I hadn't experienced
Why would it be about the same, based on whether you were homeless or not? Because I guess what that tells me is that if you were homeless or not homeless, and you feel relatively the same way, there must be a reason other than your personal experience that supports your confidence that this is.
I mean, partially it might be my level of compassion, but that compassion is seated in my upbringing, which is also seated in some level of spirituality and religion. And I mean, in the Bible, Christ even said, for those who have nowhere to go, I'm paraphrasing here, but for those who are homeless, give them a home. And for those who are hungry, feed them.
So it sounds like the main reason supporting this is your spiritual upbringing and values.
Yeah,
In that way.
but I do think that housing first is confirmed by practice from what I've seen so far.
I'm wondering, is it the same thing we're talking about? You're thinking about spirituality and Jesus as it being the right thing to do versus what is effective, or are those the same thing? Does that make sense? Like the reason why you think it's a good method is because of your spiritual upbringing, or a reason why you think the homeless should be it's valuable to look after them in society. Are those the same thing, or are they separate?
I think they are facets of a similar experience. So yes, I think that people who are houseless should be housed because of my upbringing and because of my level of compassion. That's over here. And there's a Venn diagram in which housing first exists because it's shown to be the most effective practice, and they cross over. Not everyone is going to be Christian or religious or spiritual. Someone might be an atheist, in which case they see this housing first program and see 81% efficacy of getting people self-sufficient in 1 year. They're going to be like, yeah, that's the best thing we have so far. Let's go for that. And I have no judgment on their feeling on that other than they're doing something that benefits the community and they believe in something that benefits the community.
I suppose to try to summarize it, what is your, after the conversation, what's your current confidence level that giving people a home solves homelessness?
Just that? Just giving people a home solving homelessness? Or the package deal that Helsinki enacted.
Let's just go with the first one, I guess. It's hard, yeah.
I think if you gave each individual person experiencing houselessness a place to live of their own, I would say, like in a vacuum, maybe 70-75% of those people will be self-sufficient after a year. But that is massively more impactful than current practices that are throughout most of the United States.
And what's the biggest reason that supports that?
That's the basis that you need for some basic needs. Like sleep is a basic need. If people are on the streets, they don't get sleep. I did not get sleep when I was on the streets. The most amount of sleep that I got when I was on the streets was on buses, because I knew that I could fall asleep and that eventually the bus driver would kick me off, but I would get some block of sleep. If I were in public, I would be harassed by police, security guards, people trying to steal from me. Like, housing provides provides sleep. That's a basic need. Housing provides means to create a warm meal. That's a basic need.
Is this from your personal experience or information you gathered in another way?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Gotcha. Cool. How would you think of the conversation style method?
That was good. I thought you were...
I'm less experienced, so
well, I thought you were both effective at like drilling into the like core of why I believe what I believe and what I experienced. So yeah, I mean, I appreciated the conversation and I look forward to seeing it.
Thanks for stopping.
What's your book called?
My book is called Homeless with God.
Oh, you told me that, yeah.
Yeah. My name's Joshua Robinson.
Cool.
Again, I'm David.
David, yep, Chad.
Joshua. It's my middle name.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for
Thank
stopping.
you.
David, thank you. That was really cool.
You can offer him
If you would like, you can take one of these puzzle pieces,
Oh,
pick
sure.
a color.
I have a yellow one if you really want yellow.
I mean, this red one's already in my hands.
Okay.
It's the conversation technique. You can look up more on YouTube. It's called Street Epistemology.
Nice.
Epistemology is the study of
Study of
knowledge. So just
Yeah,
trying to figure out how we know what we know.
yeah, for sure. I thought that was great. Thank you.
Thanks for stopping.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks again. Do you have questions?
No, I was just listening in.
Okay. Yeah.
Really cool stuff.
How do you feel?
Not bad. Maybe I tried to simplify a little bit too much with the study being linked to the confidence.
More data that would put the confidence up or down.
That was fascinating to me that he said he's 81% confident. He's 81% confident.
They're these pink ones.
And then if you took the study away, his confidence would go up.
Right.
That confused me.
For me, it was a way of, like, he had a sample size of 1 of 1 as personal experience. So he's like, this worked. This must work for everyone. And then the study was just mislabeled as a reason. It was more just like a variable that would bring it up or down based on the results of the study. And there's one study now that says 81% of people it works for.
Okay. Right. And didn't we go into why the sample size of 1 would cause him to be 100? Did he say that?
I guess I implied it. It seemed to be what he was getting at from my point of view.
He said it'd go up to 100, right?
Yeah, if he could only use his personal experience,
Right. So,
because he found a home,
right.
That got him out of homelessness.
And that's why I was wondering why that was a good enough reason to be 100%.
Because of like ignorance, because he didn't see anybody not using that method and getting home, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was interesting too. Like, I still don't know if we know his reasons because he brought spirituality into it, but I didn't really see how that directly corresponded to the claim. Does that make sense? Like, and then at the end, it seemed like it wasn't about spirituality again. It was just about his personal experience.
Yeah. I mean, the spirituality and being brought up
Uh-huh.
with spirituality informed his compassion,
Okay.
and his compassion is what informed his confidence in his claim. If he had
Compassion solves the problem.
no personal experience and no study.
Mm-hmm. I think, based on the conversation, that he's not sure and he's thinking about it, and that's why it was hard for me to understand it too.
Yeah.
Which is probably normal in an SC conversation. Well, I think it's this, and then you test it, and it's just like, well, maybe it's this.
Yeah.
Or it's this.
Like whack-a-mole.
So you start thinking about what is it really.
Right.
So hopefully it was effective as a conversation. It was interesting, and he was a nice person. So
Yeah. And he said, it sounded like he said something like, even an atheist could have this compassion and reach the same conclusion, right?
Mm-hmm. I was kind of tuning out at that point. I was trying to re-steer, think of the next place to go.
Yeah.
I get anxious about knowing where I'm going to go next, and still listening to the interlocutor, and also getting through all the things gives me a little bit of anxiety. So I think maybe I moved too quickly, and without asking more questions and getting to that this framework in my head that personal experience gets you to 100, and any studies data will move you up or down, and there's probably more exploration to do, and kind of seeing how important personal experience was to him. I could have pushed a little bit more on that. I think what kept me from doing that was just having not that much experience and trying to hold all these ideas in my head and to successfully get it done. The more variables I introduce, the more I'm how do I restate all this information? It gets more crowded, so it's just harder to do the more variables there, and especially when you're new at it.
Right. Was there anything that you were curious about that you didn't feel like you got to ask?
Probably non-S. Well, what I was thinking was non-SE questions, but I think you asked what's maybe a good reason, or what's a reason people give where this wouldn't be the case.
Oh, the strongest argument against this claim.
Yeah, why wouldn't homelessness work, or why wouldn't giving somebody a home work? I'm sure there are arguments against it. It's also complicated, and narrowing down the claim. It's not just giving somebody a home; it's giving them all these basic services, which is hard to kind of dial in a little bit. It's the more variables, the more complicated the conversation, the harder it is for me to hold all those ideas.
This was an interesting one because I've been trying to do more experimentation on not necessarily exploring whether a claim is true or not, but exploring why they think their solution to a problem is a sufficient solution, enough to support the confidence that they have that solution is effective.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like asking SE type questions, but not about the truth of a claim, but how they know their solution is effective, instead of how they know a claim is accurate. So, yeah, that was good. He had good feedback about how the conversation went. There seemed to be some reflection there. So,
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought it was
Could have
good.
gone worse. I gave it a
Yeah.
try.
Yeah.